Should the Big Ten get rid of divisions or keep them? Do you love them, hate them, think they should go away?
I'm in favor of getting teams playing other teams more often than what happens. I mean, if you look across the SEC, you can go centuries, it seems like, without Alabama and Georgia playing in the actual season. And then Nebraska would play Ohio State every season, but not, two other teams wouldn't. I would like to just see some more randomness, I guess, period. And I guess getting rid of divisions would be one way of doing that.
I kind of like the idea of pods too. It almost sets up a little bit, and I know people go crazy when I say this, but it almost sets up a little bit like the NFL, right? With you got division rivals that you play every year, and then maybe you move around the different pods as far as like who you play each year, and maybe like a +1 or something across the board. So like you play whatever Ohio State, Michigan one year, but then maybe you pick up their game somewhere along there to make it 9. I don't know. I like that idea. It kind of makes more sense to me than just having the 2 divisions like that, setting it up in pods. I know we'd have to add a couple teams, and that's a whole different discussion that I don't want to start tonight, but I cut the idea of split up a little bit personally.
So, I mean, there's a lot of variations of this, obviously. And, the SEC seems to be rumored to be going to a setup like this where when they add Texas and Oklahoma, they have 16 teams, and they could have Boomer, double check my math here, they would have 3 permanent rivals, and then they do a 5-on, 5-off. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the FCC's kind of left everything open. I mean, you've heard everything from things like that to them just running their little mini playoff type structure. I mean, they're all over the map right now, kind of leaving everything on the table, I think, to start. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things are at play here. One, do we have 8 conference games or 9? We have 9 currently, and you can do that with this setup, or you could go to 8, especially if we end up doing more scheduling with the Pac-12 and ACC. I guess that still could potentially be back on the table with this type of scenario. But it does potentially set you up for having, 3 teams always on your schedule and having some yearly contests there to have your rivalries, and then be able to have within a 4-year cycle, every single team in the Big Ten in Memorial Stadium, as well as visiting, right? So you wouldn't go to those stretches where you get, and it's not just Nebraska, Iowa would finally get Ohio State 2 out of 4 years, right? Instead of being able to skip them for 6 or 7. We've always had Ohio State. I think that the challenge ultimately with this a little bit is, and I heard Sipple breaking this down a little bit on his radio show last week when this kind of came out. It was like, how do you actually get some balance or fairness when, if it's for TV purposes, Ohio State is going to get Michigan. They would get, Michigan State and Penn State or something like that, right? Well, I mean, sure, Ohio State can take that, no problem. Just like we're probably would get Iowa, Wisconsin, and either Minnesota or Northwestern, 3 of the tougher teams out of the current West. And if we do that, then you're going to have other schools get an easier path, right? I mean, Northwestern potentially could get, Illinois, Purdue, and whatever, right? Rutgers will get Maryland, Indiana, and Ohio State, whatever, right? It's just not going to be quite balanced, right? If you're trying to maximize those standing rivalries. So I think it'll be really intriguing to see how they set this up to maximize the TV revenue, but at the same time have some level of fairness on a balanced schedule. Boomer, I think you're
muted. You're muted, Boomer.
Oh, sorry. And I think that TV is something people forget about when it comes to, the scheduling aspect of it, and everything from times of games to how the Big Ten creates the schedules. And, that plays a big role in this. The amount of money that's being shelled out for this, that's going to talk a lot. So that is something I think the Big Ten is going to take into serious thought when it comes to how they're setting up the entire conference for the future. Is what do our TV partners want? They want games that draw eyeballs, and, teams like Nebraska, matched up against big teams draw eyeballs. So they might see those kind of games, be promoted a lot more. So that's just natural. I mean,
yeah, balance is an interesting word because, balance, I think a lot of times we still think geographically, especially if you're going to try to pod it up. But at the end of the day, I mean, when you're talking about just use NFL as an example. There's still times where geographically it doesn't always make sense. Dallas is still in the East because of historic rivalries, right? And when there's other teams that would have been closer. Think about what the NFL used to be back before they went to 32. When they were at 30, you'd have divisions of 5, 5, and 4. They weren't even equal numbers.
Right.
So could you conceivably do a pod where not everyone's 4? I guess, I mean, that's one way of thinking about it, because this gets
Rutgers is like half a team anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, you think about it like that, and I mean, we all know the you can throw a couple of names out there if the Big Ten was ever going to expand. Obviously, a Notre Dame, or you could come up with 2 names that would be big enough to make it worthwhile to do. But if you didn't, could you still try to get away with some kind of pod system, even if you didn't have an even number to do it? I don't know. I mean,
well, I guess even though the pod system looks nice and there's balance to it, especially with 16, I don't know what I don't know what the point is, I guess. I mean, if you're essentially gonna have a 1 pod system if you do this, because you're gonna have, say, 3 designated rivals. So it's kind of a 14 pod. Everybody will have a 14 pod essentially. Just it won't be quite the same. And then you just rotate. I mean, the math works out where you simply would have everybody on campus every 3rd year essentially, right? And so it works out really well without having to do a full pod system. So I don't think you need pods unless you go to 16. Even then, you don't really need them.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Dave, too. And I think that's kind of my point about the pods, is it doesn't have to be like the set things, I guess, as you say, like set up like divisions, right? But I mean, they need something with a little bit more. I don't know if parity is the right word to use as far as like who plays who when and around. But I mean, I think I was using the NFL reference because it's like, even when they've got their AFC and NFC, and then they've got every other or every year, like the AFC West will play the NFC West like every 3 years, right? Or whatever it is, every 4 years. And then they play like a couple teams or an entire division in the AFC as well. And
yes,
that's
right,
kind of how, and so it makes sense to me to kind of split it up that way, so that there's maybe more consistency in the way that they split up the way that the games are played among the divisions. And I think someone even commented here on our comments saying that like it makes sense. I think Jason Stenger said it makes sense because we play Ohio State 3 years in a row. We don't see Michigan for that entire time, or we don't see Maryland and Rutgers, for 15 years, right? I mean, just different ways. And I think that there's an easier way to make it make sense, for sure.
Hey, Boomer, there's also one from, I think it was Troy, wrote something about the East-West. Yeah, Nebraska has an NIL advantage in the West. East-West divisions are good for us from that perspective. Again, go to the Huskers.com site, go to any of the Big Ten, websites, and 2023, they've already removed Big Ten schedules from them. So it looks like at least what was going to be happening in the traditional divisions is something's changing. But to Troy's point there is that he's saying he'd like just keep it East-West. He thinks we actually have an advantage in the future, which is odd because if you look the last few years, we have not been competitive in the standings in the West at the end of the year. We've been, definitely in the bottom half, but he's saying moving forward, we have an advantage being in the West and because of things like NIL.
There's probably some truth to that. I mean, when you think about our recruiting, we do generally recruit better than everyone else in the West, like Stephen Costello said. I mean, talent-wise, I think we're usually far and away above the rest of the West. And if you tack NIL on top of that, and then our success in the portal that we've had this offseason, theoretically, we should have talent to succeed in the West, where we haven't in the past.
Theoretically, we should have won the West.
There's a lot of theoreticals here, but I mean, we haven't done it to date. So, maybe it's not as easy as it thinks, but is it going to be any easier without divisions? I mean, I don't know, because you still got to finish in the top 2 then. So,
yeah,
that'll be interesting.
I think they're right on here. Both Troy and Stephen Costello had the same comment. I mean, like the West actually should have been into Nebraska's advantage for the last decade, considering our recruiting classes. We have not been able to deliver on that whatsoever. I mean, like this whole idea that the East and the West divisions are unbalanced solely comes down to the outcomes of the championship game. Because if you look the regular season, I mean, I think the East actually had a decent year last year. Now they're up 77-72 overall. But I mean, before last year, it was like a 1 or 2 game difference, and it's a 5 game plus on the East side. That's not why we're doing this. The West is relatively competitive in the regular season. It's that they haven't won in 8 tries a championship game, and many of those games haven't even been close. And so, and that's typically because you're going against Ohio State or maybe a really good, East squad that beat Ohio State. And so that's the problem, right? And so, to Boomer's point, going to a best top 2 scenario isn't going to help us reach the championship game. And if you're talking about Nebraska in the world of a 12-team playoff, where you potentially could have a scenario where all 5 Power 5 school conferences have the champion has an automatic bid, and all we had to do is win the West, even at 9-3, and then potentially pull off one upset to get in the playoff. That option will now be gone because the 9-3 won't get you there. You'll need to be at least 10-2, if not 11-1, to make a Big Ten championship game. And that's just going to be harder to do. It's all there is to it. The path has just been harder to get to the playoff because if we make this way.
Well, I mean, are we, we're mixing in the word playoff with this. We wouldn't have made the playoff at 9-3 anyways, even if we won the conference.
If in the future, if there is a 12-team playoff and automatic bids to conference champions, the conference championship game is a play-in game.
Sure.
I like your thinking there, Dave, too.
I mean, that's typically been that's one of the things that the Big Ten wanted was their conference champion was an automatic bid. So, so that would be now off the table. It wouldn't matter because you would have to be finished in the top 2.
Yeah, Brett Ciancia, Pick Six, would not like this discussion. He would say we are watering down not only the season but the postseason in the process here. But we'll have to get Brett on here before August.
Sure.
Well, other than that, this is the first time I guess we've had. Well, Boomer, you weren't even on. Were you on the Osborne show? No.
Some of us have jobs. So
we just prioritize interviewing a 3-time national champion.
Some people take the damn day off, Boomer. I mean, it's just
that's
mow the grass.
I serve the public generally. No, we're all right.
We all have jobs, Boomer. We just choose to job differently, I guess. But